The old park bench, worn smooth by countless anonymous bodies and buffeted by years of relentless city weather, creaked softly under Elijah Eli Vance's lean frame. Around him, the ceaseless thrum of the city was a symphony of progress and indifference. Sleek, expensive cars glided by, their tinted windows reflecting the hurried, smartphone-clutching young professionals who barely spared a glance. Pigeons strutted boldly on the cracked pavement, their iridescent necks bobbing, while the faint, sweet scent of exhaust mingled with the distant aroma of freshly baked bread from a corner deli. But Eli, in his faded, slightly too large jacket, with his ever-present supermarket trolley resting heavily beside him, remained utterly impervious to the urban rush. His gnarled fingers, surprisingly nimble despite their age, meticulously worked a needle and thread, mending a frayed sleeve on a well-loved woolen sweater. The rhythmic prick-pull of the needle through the worn fabric was the only sound that truly mattered in his immediate sphere, a quiet, meditative counterpoint to the city's cacophony, a testament to the enduring power of simple, purposeful action. At 70 years old, Eli carried the weight of time not just in the deep lines etched around his wise, sorrowful eyes, but in the subtle slump of his shoulders, a posture born of both age and burdens silently borne. His skin, a rich, dark hue, was leathery from years spent under the sun, and his sparse white hair peeked from beneath a worn cap. His life was one of quiet solitude, a forgotten existence on the city's streets, where every hidden alleyway, every abandoned stairwell, served as a temporary sanctuary. His only constant companion was his battered supermarket trolley, a rusty testament to his nomadic existence. It was laden with stacks of old, yellowed science books, their pages brittle with age, and countless scraps of paper densely covered in complex chemical formulas and hurried biological sketches. But its most precious cargo, wrapped carefully in a waterproof plastic bag and nestled deep beneath the other items, was a worn, leather-bound notebook, the secret repository of his entire life's work, a compendium of observations, theories, and, crucially, damning evidence. Eli's disheveled, often grimy appearance usually caused people to shy away, to avert their gaze, perceiving him merely as another anonymous face among the city's unhoused population. Yet, behind the tired facade, his eyes still sparkled with an intelligent, almost piercing intensity, often clouded by an unspoken, profound sadness, a deep reservoir of unresolved grief and injustice. He possessed an extraordinary memory, particularly for scientific and medical details, for intricate chemical structures, and for obscure historical events that the world, particularly the powerful echelons of industry, had long conspired to forget. His internal conflict was a persistent, quiet struggle, a battle fought daily within the confines of his own mind. To remain hidden, to uphold the fragile peace of anonymity, to avoid the judgmental glares and deep-seated prejudices of a society that had so cruelly cast him aside, yet simultaneously to yearn for recognition, to have his true worth finally seen, and to rectify a terrible wrong he had witnessed decades ago. A catastrophic error, a deliberate act of scientific suppression, that had not only cost him his illustrious career as a renowned molecular biology professor, but had irrevocably shattered his once normal life, leaving him with nothing but his intellect and the burden of truth. That morning, the air still held the sharp bite of pre-dawn cold, but a thin, watery sunlight was beginning to filter through the skeletal branches of the park's ancient trees. Eli sat beneath a large, spreading oak, its bare limbs silhouetted against the pale sky. He was attempting to read a dense textbook on toxicology, its cover faded, its pages brittle, through the broken lens of his old spectacles. One side of the frame was missing, forcing him to hold the book at an awkward angle, but his concentration was absolute. His lips moved silently as he traced the complex scientific terms, deciphering intricate diagrams of molecular structures, his brow furrowed in deep thought. The book was so old, its pages threatened to crumble at his touch, yet he handled it with the reverence one might reserve for a sacred relic, a tangible link to a past life, a professional identity he was no longer allowed to claim. Around him, the city stirred, a restless giant awakening. Commuters rushed by, their expensive shoes clicking a rapid rhythm on the polished granite sidewalks. They paid him no mind, their faces fixed on their smartphones, their minds already immersed in the day's corporate battles. They treated him as an unremarkable, almost invisible part of the urban scenery, a fleeting shadow quickly forgotten. Despite his solitary existence, Eli was not entirely isolated. He shared an unspoken camaraderie with other unhoused individuals in the area, a network of mutual support and shared hardship that existed just beneath the city's glittering surface. This hidden community, often dismissed by mainstream society, was where Eli found a unique form of connection and purpose. He often dispensed basic medical knowledge, offering rudimentary first aid to those in need, using ingenuity and his deep understanding of natural remedies. He knew which plants in the park could staunch bleeding, which herbs could calm an upset stomach, and how to identify early signs of infection. He regularly shared survival tips for navigating the city's harsh realities, from finding safe shelters to identifying sources of clean water. He never sought gratitude or praise. Instead, he simply and quietly helped those less fortunate than himself, finding a quiet purpose in these small acts of kindness, a way to apply his vast knowledge even when stripped of his academic platform. He was, in essence, a doctor without a clinic, a professor without a lecture hall, dedicated to alleviating suffering wherever he found it. One frigid night, a fellow unhoused man named Mike, a burly former construction worker with a kind smile, collapsed with severe stomach pains after eating spoiled food from a dumpster. Mike was visibly deteriorating, his skin clammy, his breathing shallow. Without hesitation, Eli sprang into action. Drawing upon his extensive biological knowledge, he quickly diagnosed mild food poisoning, recognizing the distinct set of symptoms. He calmly instructed Mike on how to induce vomiting, then produced a small, tightly sealed bag containing activated charcoal, a staple he always carried for emergencies, a testament to his foresight and preparedness, and gave it to Mike, explaining its detoxifying properties. Going a step further, Eli, remembering Mike's aversion to bitter tastes, gathered certain wild herbs he knew grew in a secluded part of the park, even in the biting cold. He meticulously identified the plants, their Latin names still at the tip of his tongue, and then, with surprising dexterity, brewed a crude but effective herbal tea over a makeshift fire fueled by scavenged twigs and paper. He explained to Mike in simple terms that this concoction, with its natural anti-inflammatory and detoxifying agents, would help soothe his stomach and aid in his recovery. Mike, pale and weak, watched Eli with dawning awe and profound gratitude as he slowly began to feel better, the tea warming him from the inside out. Eli simply nodded, a rare, warm light entering his tired eyes. It was moments like these, unseen by the world, unrecorded by history, where Eli's true self, the compassionate healer and brilliant scientist, emerged, finding purpose and meaning in the most unlikely of circumstances. These quiet acts of selfless help were his silent defiance against a world that had tried to strip him of his worth. Eli also possessed a meticulous observational skill, a keen eye for detail honed over years of rigorous scientific inquiry and decades of quiet vigilance on the streets. Sometimes, as he walked past a high-end gourmet food store, its brightly lit windows showcasing perfectly arranged produce and artisanal goods, he would pause, seemingly lost in thought. His sharp eyes, however, would be scanning the ingredient labels of packaged products, his mind swiftly processing the long, unfamiliar chemical names. He would subtly frown, his lips moving as he murmured complex chemical formulas to himself, deciphering the hidden code of processed foods, often identifying substances that were either unnecessary, potentially harmful, or even outright illicit in certain contexts. Once, while watching a grainy news report flickering on a discarded television in an alleyway, detailing a massive nationwide food recall due to bacterial contamination, Eli shook his head with a wistful sigh, his eyes distant, haunted by a past knowledge. "They don't know," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the city's drone, a lament for the ignorant masses. The smallest errors can cause the greatest catastrophes, or, more insidiously, the most deliberate deceptions can masquerade as accidental flaws. He had seen such deceptions before, in his former life, and the cost had been far greater than any financial penalty. It had been his very existence. Deep within his old supermarket trolley, nestled beneath the stacks of books and miscellaneous belongings, lay a tightly bound bundle of documents. It was his life's work, carefully preserved, yet brittle and yellowed with age, bearing the faint scent of stale paper and decades of dust. This collection included independent scientific research papers, meticulously detailed analyses of genetically modified food products and chemical preservatives, alongside irrefutable evidence of a monumental scientific scandal that had unfolded decades prior. A scandal that involved powerful corporations, corrupted academics, and the systematic suppression of truth. This meticulously organized compilation of papers, facts, and figures was the raw truth of his destroyed career, the long-sought answer to a secret buried by immense power and unimaginable wealth. It represented his life's dedication, the very reason he had been cast out, and it waited, patiently, for the precise moment to be revealed. He had carried this burden, this explosive truth, for far too long, like a ticking time bomb of righteousness, a hidden weapon against injustice. The weight of it sometimes felt unbearable, a silent companion in his solitary journey, but it was also his purpose, his reason for enduring. He knew, with a certainty that transcended despair, that one day the truth would demand to be heard. And he, Elijah Vance, the seemingly invisible man, would be its reluctant, yet unwavering, messenger. The morning air of the financial district, usually crisp and invigorating, felt particularly sharp, biting at exposed skin with the promise of deep winter. Outside the gleaming glass and steel skyscraper that housed the multinational Sterling Group, a constant stream of taxis zipped by, their horns blaring in a discordant symphony with the hurried chatter of commuters. In front of the Daily Grind, an upscale coffee shop, a long queue of customers snaked out onto the sidewalk, their faces tired but impatient, clutching their smartphones like lifelines, each person a small, self-contained unit rushing through the vast, indifferent city. The scent of artisanal coffee and freshly baked pastries wafted from the shop, a deceptive veil over the relentless, often predatory rhythm of the urban jungle. Eli sat on a secluded park bench nearby, observing the relentless flow of humanity. He typically avoided crowded areas, preferring the quiet anonymity of the city's forgotten corners, the solace of the shadows. But today, an inexplicable pull, a strange premonition, had drawn him here. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible whisper in the back of his mind, a feeling that something significant was about to unfold. He meticulously rearranged the books in his trolley, his hands moving with a practiced grace that belied their age, his eyes tracing the complex scientific titles that seemed to hum with forgotten knowledge. He felt a subtle tremor in the air, a sense that something was about to shift, a disruption in the city's predictable pattern. A sleek black limousine, its windows darkly tinted, purred to a stop directly in front of the Daily Grind, momentarily disrupting the flow of pedestrian traffic. From its plush interior emerged Mr. Alistair Sterling, a powerful billionaire in his early 60s. His silver hair was impeccably slicked back, gleaming under the weak morning sun. His Italian suit, clearly custom-tailored, bespoke and undeniably expensive, seemed to ripple with authority, and his face wore a perpetual, practiced corporate smile, an artificial veneer that barely concealed a deep-seated arrogance and a profound impatience. Sterling was the CEO of the Sterling Group, a vast empire spanning finance, technology, and, crucially, a growing portfolio in the food and beverage industry. He was notoriously self-absorbed, meticulously curating his public image while neglecting his personal well-being. He was known for his habit of skipping meals or relying on quick, pre-made convenience foods to maximize his working hours, often boasting about his efficiency. He was a man who measured success in quarterly reports and soaring stock prices, and he valued ruthless efficiency and superficial perfection above all else. His haughty demeanor and tendency to judge others based solely on their appearance and perceived social standing were well known, and he firmly believed his position was unassailable, his judgment infallible. This morning he seemed particularly harried and irritable, his movements curt and impatient, his usual polished composure frayed at the edges. Sterling strode into the Daily Grind with an air of self-importance, his expensive shoes clicking sharply on the polished floor. He barely acknowledged the baristas, his order delivered with a terse, impatient tone. Within moments, he emerged with a large, vibrant green smoothie, its rich color promising a boost of health, a convenient substitute for a proper breakfast. Without a glance at the surrounding world, his eyes already fixed on his waiting limousine, he quickly made his way towards the vehicle, fumbling with the lid of his smoothie, preparing to take his first hurried sip. He was utterly oblivious to the subtle currents of the street, to the watchful eyes of those who existed on its fringes, the anonymous figures he barely registered as human. His world revolved around his next meeting, his next deal, his next calculated acquisition. Just as Sterling was about to reach his car, a scrawny, unhoused boy, no older than 10, darted out from behind a parked delivery van. His name was Leo, and he was trying to sell a crumpled, outdated newspaper, its headlines irrelevant to the fast-paced world of finance. Leo was a sharp, quick-witted child, his eyes missing nothing that happened on these streets. He possessed an almost feral instinct for survival, honed by years of living on the edge. He knew every alley, every hidden passage, every unspoken rule of the city's underbelly. He had a natural ability to recognize anomalies, to spot anything out of place. He had grown accustomed to being ignored, to the dismissive waves of wealthy commuters. But today, as he caught sight of the vivid green smoothie in Sterling's hand, his sharp eyes widened in alarm. Something about the way the barista had prepared it, a fleeting, almost imperceptible gesture, had caught his attention. He had seen the barista discreetly add a few drops of liquid from a small, unlabeled vial into Sterling's smoothie when he thought no one was looking. It was a detail so minute, so easily missed, yet Leo, with his hyper-alert senses and Eli's subtle teachings, immediately recognized it as deeply unnatural, a clandestine act. "Sir, don't drink that!" Leo shrieked, his voice a raw, desperate cry that was barely audible above the city's roar, cracking with the effort of his warning. He pumped his skinny legs, trying to run faster, to catch up to Sterling, his face flushed with urgency and fear. He felt a profound, instinctive dread, a primal alarm bell ringing in his young mind. Sterling, startled by the unexpected shout, instinctively flinched, almost dropping his smoothie. He spun around, his face contorted in annoyance. He took in Leo's disheveled appearance, the worn clothes, the smudged face, and his expression hardened into one of cold disdain. "What? Get away from me, you little street urchin! You're bothering me!" He extended his arm, preparing to swat Leo away like an annoying fly, intending to dismiss the boy's warning as a pathetic attempt to gain attention or sympathy. He made to continue his hurried walk, but Leo, fueled by an undeniable premonition of danger, refused to be deterred. The boy, surprisingly tenacious, latched onto the hem of Sterling's expensive suit jacket, his small fingers surprisingly strong in their desperation. His eyes, wide and filled with genuine terror, were fixed on the green smoothie. "No, sir, you don't understand. I saw the person making it. They put something else in it. It wasn't right." Leo gasped, his words tumbling out in a rush, desperate to explain the clandestine act he had witnessed. He remembered Eli's quiet lessons. Always watch, always see what others miss, especially when it comes to what people consume. His instincts screamed danger. Sterling scowled, his irritation deepening into outright contempt. He looked down at the vibrant green smoothie in his hand, then at Leo's earnest, pleading face, a look of profound scorn etched onto his features. "You impudent brat! What on earth are you babbling about? Do you have any idea who I am? I am Alistair Sterling. Are you daring to suggest there's something wrong with my drink? Do you have any proof? Or is this just the pathetic babbling of a dirty street kid trying to get attention?" He made a dismissive gesture towards his private chauffeur, Richard, who was standing stiffly by the limousine, already anticipating his employer's command to remove the nuisance. It was at that precise moment, as Sterling's disdainful words hung in the biting morning air, that Eli, who had been observing the entire scene from his secluded park bench, felt a jolt, a cold shock run down his spine. He recognized Leo, and he recognized the raw panic in the boy's voice. Leo's frantic words, "something not right" in the smoothie, struck a deep, resonant chord within Eli, awakening a horrifying memory, a precise, chilling echo of his own buried past. He knew, with absolute certainty, that Leo was not a child prone to fantasy or lies. There was something profoundly, terribly wrong. The specific description of a liquid from an unlabeled vial triggered a cascade of forgotten data, chemical formulas, and the bitter taste of betrayal. Eli, his face now etched with a grim determination, slowly, deliberately, began to push his supermarket trolley forward, its rusty wheels grinding softly on the pavement. Every deliberate movement, every strained creak of the old trolley, carried the weight of a monumental decision. The act was a conscious, almost painful breaking of his self-imposed isolation. He had spent decades living on the fringes, invisible, forgotten, allowing society to dismiss him. But watching Leo, a young, vulnerable soul, try desperately to warn a man who was too arrogant to listen, Eli realized he could no longer remain silent. This was more than just intervening in a street squabble. This was about protecting an innocent child, yes, but it was also about exposing a far greater truth, a truth that had been suppressed for decades, a truth that had consumed his life and ultimately led to his downfall. It was a truth that could threaten not just one arrogant billionaire, but countless unsuspecting lives. He had remained silent for too long, endured too much injustice. Now, as the chill of the morning intensified, a burning resolve ignited within him. This was the precise moment. He had to act. He had to step out of the shadows. The usual cacophony of the financial district, typically a blend of honking taxis and hurried footsteps, abruptly dissolved into a tense, almost suffocating silence. Alistair Sterling, his green smoothie still clutched in his hand, stood frozen, caught between the persistent tug of Leo on his jacket and the unexpected arrival of Eli. His initial annoyance warped into a look of profound disdain as he took in Eli's disheveled appearance. He was accustomed to sweeping such nuisances aside with a dismissive gesture or a curt word. But Eli's steady gaze, devoid of the usual pleading or deference, was unsettling. "What in God's name is this?" Sterling snarled, his voice sharp with irritation, addressing Eli. "First this little street rat won't let go, and now you, old man? Are you here for handouts too? Get lost. I don't have time for this absurdity." He made a harsh gesture, intending to brush Leo's hand away with a violent motion. Leo, shrinking from Sterling's aggression, instinctively tightened his grip on Eli's worn jacket, his small body trembling. Eli, however, remained unperturbed. He gently placed his supermarket trolley down, the rusty wheels grating softly on the pavement, a sound that seemed amplified in the sudden stillness. He looked directly into Sterling's eyes, his own gaze unwavering, holding the billionaire's with an unexpected intensity. "Mr. Sterling," Eli began, his voice a calm, resonant baritone that cut through the sharp morning air with an almost startling clarity. It carried the weight of experience, the quiet authority of knowledge. "This child is not attempting to annoy you. He is trying to warn you about something profoundly important." Sterling scoffed, a sneering, derisive sound that dripped with condescension. "Warn me? About what, pray tell? That my premium organic smoothie is, what, too green? Are you suggesting this street urchin knows more about my health than my personal nutritionist?" He eyed Eli, a mocking grin twisting his lips, his gaze sweeping contemptuously from Eli's worn cap to his tattered shoes. "And you, old man, who exactly do you think you are? Some kind of hidden guru? A sage from the sewers? Or simply another desperate vagrant looking for a quick buck by peddling ridiculous scare tactics?" He gestured dismissively towards Eli's trolley. "Do you think a few crazy stories from a homeless man and his street accomplice are going to make me, Alistair Sterling, reconsider a purchase from one of the city's most exclusive establishments?" He turned to Richard, his chauffeur, who stood stiffly by the limousine. "Richard, remove these two immediately. I'm already late for a crucial board meeting." Leo whimpered softly, pressing himself further into Eli's side. Eli placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder, his eyes never leaving Sterling's. "Mr. Sterling," Eli continued, his voice maintaining its composure, though now imbued with an unyielding steel. "The boy is telling the truth, and I believe him implicitly." Sterling let out a harsh, barking laugh, a sound devoid of humor that grated against the ears. "Believe him? You believe a homeless child? Do you have any proof, old man? Do you truly believe that the word of a vagrant, no matter how earnest, can possibly outweigh the reputation of the daily grind? Or my own judgment, for that matter?" He raised the smoothie to his lips once more, a defiant gesture, ready to prove his disdain for Eli's warnings. It was then that Eli acted, with a sudden, precise movement that belied his age. Without a word, he reached into his trolley, his gnarled fingers working with a practiced familiarity amidst the clutter of his belongings. The faint clinking of metal against glass could be heard. Sterling, mid-scoff, froze, his hand suspended near his mouth, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. He hadn't expected the old man to do anything beyond more verbal pleas. Eli slowly withdrew his hand. What he held was not a weapon, nor an empty cup, but a compact, professional-grade portable microscope, carefully wrapped in a soft, faded cloth. Beside it, nestled in his palm, were several small sterile glass slides and a slender glass vial containing a clear, viscous reagent. His face, usually a canvas of weary resignation, was now etched with an intense, almost surgical focus. His eyes, normally clouded with a distant sadness, sharpened, glinting with the cold precision of a scientist. "Mr. Sterling," Eli announced, his voice now imbued with an undeniable authority that commanded attention, cutting through Sterling's arrogance like a scalpel. "If you refuse to trust the word of this boy, then perhaps you will trust the unbiased judgment of science." He gestured towards the smoothie. "Allow me to demonstrate." Sterling stared, completely stunned. His eyes flickered from the sleek, high-tech microscope in Eli's hand to the vials, then back to Eli's now commanding face. The derision slowly drained from his features, replaced by a profound bewilderment, then a creeping sense of unease. He had expected a tirade, a plea, anything but this calm, scientific challenge. How could a homeless man possess such equipment and speak with such an air of educated confidence? What is this charade?" Sterling stammered, his voice losing its customary crispness. "What are you trying to pull, old man? Some kind of magic trick? A street performance?" He tried to recover his composure, but his eyes kept returning to the microscope, an object so incongruous in Eli's hands. Eli ignored Sterling's bluster. With unhurried, deliberate motions, he gently removed the lid from Sterling's green smoothie. The faint, earthy smell of the healthy concoction filled the air. He then carefully, almost reverently, collected a few drops of the dark green liquid onto one of the glass slides. His hands, though aged and slightly trembling, moved with the precision of long-forgotten expertise. Next, he added a single minute drop of the clear reagent from his vial onto the smoothie sample. The liquid shimmered, briefly interacting with the green smoothie. Finally, he carefully placed the slide onto the stage of the portable microscope, adjusting the focus with practiced ease. "Mr. Sterling," Eli stated, his voice now low, grave, but resonating with the weight of decades of suppressed truth. "I am Dr. Elijah Vance. I was formerly a professor of molecular biology at Columbia University. For over 4 decades, my life's work has been the meticulous study of food additives, biological toxins, and their effects on human physiology. And I believe, with absolute scientific certainty, that young Leo witnessed something that jeopardizes your health." Sterling's entire body seemed to stiffen, his elegant posture transforming into a rigid, petrified stance. "Dr. Elijah Vance?" he whispered, the name barely audible. It was a name that resonated deep within the corridors of his own corporate memory, a name that had been meticulously erased from public discourse decades ago. A ghost from his past, a name associated with a major, hushed-up scandal. The practiced corporate smile vanished from his face, replaced by an expression of abject shock, then dawning horror. He stared at the portable microscope in Eli's hands, then at the innocent-looking green smoothie he had been moments from consuming. The carefully constructed facade of his impenetrable world suddenly cracked, revealing a terrifying vulnerability. Eli, his gaze unwavering, slowly extended the microscope towards Sterling. "Please, sir, you may verify it for yourself. Look closely at this sample of your smoothie." Sterling hesitated, a profound tremor running through him. His mind raced, grappling with the impossible reality before him. He cautiously leaned forward, his eye pressing against the cool metal of the eyepiece. He adjusted the focus, his breath catching in his throat. What he saw through the magnified lens sent a jolt of pure terror through his entire being. It was not the wholesome, vibrant cellular structure of fresh plant matter he might have expected. Instead, scattered amongst the greenish liquid, were distinct, irregular crystalline structures, faintly iridescent, tinged with an unnerving bluish hue. They appeared alien, non-organic, and disturbingly sharp-edged. As he adjusted the focus further, he could also discern thin, almost imperceptible fibrous strands, shimmering and moving slightly within the liquid, like microscopic tendrils. These structures were utterly foreign to any natural food product. They possessed a synthetic, manufactured appearance that screamed wrong. They seemed to pulse with a subtle, malevolent energy, growing slightly, subtly, under his very eye. What in God's name is this?" Sterling stammered, his voice choked with revulsion, a visceral fear replacing his former arrogance. He recoiled violently from the microscope, almost stumbling backward. His face, usually a mask of controlled confidence, was now ashen, his skin clammy. He looked at the smoothie cup, now resting precariously on a nearby bench, as if it were a vial of potent poison. The liquid, once appealing, now appeared sinister, its verdant color a sickly, menacing green. Eli slowly lowered the microscope, his expression grim. His eyes, piercing and cold, met Sterling's horrified gaze. "That, Mr. Sterling," Eli stated, his voice a chilling pronouncement, "is a highly concentrated form of a protein denaturing agent, specifically a variant of what I once, in my suppressed research, termed polyprotein stabilizer X. In minute, almost untraceable quantities, it is sometimes used, regrettably, in certain heavily processed food products to extend shelf life or create specific textures, often disguised under benign-sounding names like texturizing agent or moisture retainer to avoid public scrutiny." Eli's gaze flickered to the brightly lit interior of the Daily Grind, to the array of healthy-looking prepackaged items on display. "However," he continued, his voice gaining momentum, "when administered in excessive doses, or critically, when it interacts with specific enzymes present in fresh raw ingredients, such as the very potent enzymes found abundantly in the raw green vegetables that form the basis of your so-called healthy smoothie, it triggers an extreme accelerated reaction within the body. It aggressively disrupts the natural protein structures of cells." Eli paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink into Sterling's rapidly comprehending mind. "You would not die immediately, Mr. Sterling," he continued, his tone devoid of any sympathy, purely factual, "but it would induce severe systemic protein damage. The acute symptoms would involve rapid onset of nausea, vomiting, intense abdominal pain, followed by a period of deceptive recovery that would mask the ongoing internal destruction. Over time, and with repeated exposure, it would lead to severe and irreversible organ damage, particularly to your liver and kidneys. Your digestive system would be compromised, and your immune system would be catastrophically weakened, leaving you highly susceptible to opportunistic infections and chronic illness. This is not merely an unapproved food additive for fresh products. It is a highly restricted, potentially lethal agent designed for industrial, not direct human, consumption in significant quantities." His finger tapped the now sinister green puddle of smoothie on the bench. "And those microscopic fibrous strands you observed. They are a form of biodegradable polymer, designed to thicken the liquid and, crucially, to obscure the rapid breakdown and putrefaction of substandard ingredients. If ingested in sufficient quantities, they can cause microclots or blockages in the tiny capillaries, further exacerbating organ damage." Sterling was utterly petrified. He stared at the smoothie cup, now a terrifying symbol, as if it contained a venomous serpent. He had been mere seconds, one complacent sip, away from ingesting a slow, insidious poison. His entire being trembled uncontrollably, his carefully constructed facade of invincibility crumbling into dust. He had never imagined that a threat could come from such an unexpected source, from a humble smoothie, and be exposed by a man he had scorned. The confrontation had not just shamed him. It had revealed a horrifying secret, a direct, life-threatening danger, and the most terrifying part was that he had been seconds from becoming its unwitting victim. His mind, usually so sharp and analytical in the cutthroat world of finance, was now a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. The shrill ring of Sterling's phone pierced the heavy silence, a jarring intrusion. He jumped, startled, staring at the caller ID. It was his executive assistant, reminding him of his crucial board meeting. He had completely forgotten. His meticulously planned day, his perfectly orchestrated life, was spinning out of control. "Impossible!" Sterling finally managed to croak, his voice a ragged whisper, a ghost of its former authoritative self. You're lying. This coffee shop is a reputable establishment. They would never do something like this. They have the highest health ratings." He darted a terrified glance at Leo, who remained steadfastly beside Eli, his small face a mixture of fear and growing certainty. This boy is clearly in league with you. You're trying to set me up for extortion. That's it." He spun towards his chauffeur, Richard, who was still standing by the limousine, his face a mask of bewildered concern. "Richard, call the police immediately. Report extortion and public disturbance, and don't let these two leave." Eli remained calm, utterly unperturbed by Sterling's frantic accusations and threats. He had anticipated this precise reaction. He knew that a man like Sterling, entrenched in power and privilege, would never easily accept a truth that threatened his carefully curated world, especially when that truth originated from someone so far beneath his perceived status. "Mr. Sterling," Eli stated, his voice unwavering, resonating with a quiet, powerful conviction. "I am not here to extort you. I am here to reveal a truth that I have dedicated my life to, a truth that has been deliberately buried for far too long." He reached into his trolley once more, his movements slow and deliberate, retrieving a worn, leather-bound notebook and several brittle, yellowed papers, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. Young Leo witnessed a covert act, and I, by sheer horrifying coincidence, happened to possess the precise scientific knowledge and historical documentation to explain it. This is more than a random act of contamination, Mr. Sterling. This is connected to something far larger, far more insidious than a single unreputable barista. He opened the notebook, revealing meticulously drawn chemical formulas, complex biological diagrams, and detailed analytical charts. "This is my life's work, sir. This is the proof of a much wider network, a systemic issue within the food industry. A network of unscrupulous manufacturers and suppliers who are willing to use dangerous additives to cut costs and extend product shelf life, utterly disregarding consumer health." He looked directly into Sterling's eyes, his gaze piercing. "You, Mr. Billionaire, almost became a victim of the very same unethical practices that your own vast corporation, through its many subsidiaries and investments in the food and beverage sector, might very well be inadvertently or perhaps deliberately profiting from." Sterling flinched visibly. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that the Sterling Group had indeed made significant, strategic investments in various large-scale food processing and distribution companies in recent years. The horrifying implication that he could have been poisoned by products even remotely connected to his own empire sent a fresh wave of nausea through him. His carefully constructed world of control and immunity was crumbling around him, but his ingrained arrogance still fought for dominance. "You're insane!" Sterling shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Eli. "You are a delusional, paranoid old man. You claim to be a professor? Where are your credentials? Where is your proof? All you have is a filthy notebook and a few scraps of paper. Do you think the police will believe a homeless man with a makeshift lab? Or will they believe a reputable, successful businessman like myself?" He turned frantically to the small cluster of onlookers who had gathered, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity and burgeoning alarm, desperate to win their sympathy. "This is a setup, a cheap trick, a desperate attempt to extort money." The piercing wail of police sirens grew steadily louder, cutting through the thin morning air like a knife, culminating in a sudden, definitive wail as a patrol car screeched to a halt directly in front of the Daily Grind. Its blue and red lights painted the polished glass facade of the coffee shop in an urgent, pulsating rhythm. Alistair Sterling, his face still a mask of horror and disbelief from Eli's unsettling revelations, visibly stiffened. Then, as the car door swung open and two uniformed officers emerged, a flicker of his old, familiar arrogance reignited in his eyes. He quickly composed himself, smoothing his expensive suit jacket, a practiced politician's smile replacing the terror. He pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at Eli and Leo, his voice regaining its bluster, though a desperate edge still clung to it. "Officers, finally you're here," Sterling declared, his voice ringing with a theatrical urgency, attempting to seize control of the narrative. He strode towards the arriving officers, his movements stiff with lingering fear, but outwardly confident. "These two individuals are attempting to extort me. This man," he jabbed his finger at Eli, a theatrical flourish, "claiming to be some sort of disgraced professor, has just accused me of being poisoned by my smoothie. He's trying to extort money from me with this ridiculous, unfounded claim. It's a blatant scam." He brandished his phone, its screen still stubbornly displaying the single-digit 1 on the countdown timer, a silent, mocking testament to Eli's supposed failure. "I gave him 10 minutes to prove his outlandish claims, and he failed. This is all the proof you need of his deception." He shot a triumphant, contemptuous look at Eli, certain he had won. Eli remained unyielding, his posture surprisingly serene amidst the rising chaos. He stood beside Leo, who clung tightly to his leg, his small face etched with a mixture of fear and unwavering trust in Eli. Eli's gaze met the eyes of the first officer, a tall, burly man with a no-nonsense demeanor. This was Officer Miller, a veteran of the precinct, whose face usually betrayed little emotion. "All right, who's causing the disturbance here?" Officer Miller asked, his voice a low rumble, his gaze sweeping from the well-dressed billionaire to the disheveled old man and the frightened boy. His eyes, though outwardly impartial, held a familiar weariness, a practiced skepticism for such scenes. Clearly, in his experience, a complaint from a man like Sterling usually ended with the immediate removal of someone like Eli. "It's him, officer!" Sterling nearly shouted, jabbing his finger at Eli again. "He assaulted me with his wild accusations and threatened my health. I want him arrested immediately for extortion and defamation." He took a step back, gesturing towards the smoothie on the bench as if it were a dangerous weapon. Eli, sensing the imminent judgment, took a deep, steadying breath. This was it. The moment everything rested on. His voice, though weathered by years of exposure, projected a remarkable clarity and quiet authority. "Officer," Eli began, his gaze unwavering as he addressed Miller directly, "I am not extorting anyone. My name is Dr. Elijah Vance, and I am attempting to warn Mr. Sterling, and indeed the wider public, about a grave and immediate public health hazard." Sterling scoffed loudly, a guttural sound of derision. "Dr. Vance? Don't make me laugh. He's a homeless man. He doesn't even have an address to his name." He appealed to Officer Miller, his voice dripping with condescension. "Whom will you believe, officer? A vagrant with a wild story and a broken microscope, or a responsible, tax-paying businessman?" Officer Miller's brow furrowed. He was used to dealing with petty disputes, not complex scientific allegations from the unhoused. But there was something in Eli's steady gaze, the unexpected precision of his language, and the almost desperate sincerity in Leo's eyes that gave him pause. He glanced at the green smoothie cup on the bench, then at the sophisticated-looking portable microscope Eli still held. "All right, Mr. Vance," Officer Miller said, his tone still neutral, but with a hint of curiosity. "Do you have any proof for these claims of yours? We need concrete evidence, not just accusations." Eli didn't hesitate. He knew this was his only chance. He placed the portable microscope carefully on the edge of the bench, next to the discarded smoothie cup. "Officer, I believe this smoothie contains an unauthorized or dangerously excessive amount of a specific food additive. Young Leo here," he nodded towards the boy, "witnessed a cafe employee adding a suspicious, unlabeled substance to it. And I, using my expertise in molecular biology, have identified it as a protein denaturing agent, capable of causing severe health damage over time or acutely in high concentrations." Sterling, regaining some of his confidence, burst out laughing. "That's his word against ours. There's no proof of that. He's delusional." Eli turned his piercing gaze to Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, you yourself looked through my microscope. You witnessed the strange crystalline structures and polymer fibers within your smoothie. You cannot deny what your own eyes have seen." He turned back to Officer Miller, his voice gaining a quiet, formidable power. "Officer, this is not a personal dispute for monetary gain. This is a matter of public safety. If this substance is being used in the products of the daily grind, then hundreds, perhaps thousands of unsuspecting consumers could be slowly poisoned without their knowledge. This is a deliberate act of negligence, if not outright criminal intent. Eli then gripped his worn, leather-bound notebook. His fingers, though gnarled with age, moved with the familiarity of a scholar handling his most cherished texts. He opened it, revealing the meticulously drawn chemical formulas, the intricate biological diagrams, the dense pages of analytical data. This, officer, is the culmination of my life's work. I discovered and researched this particular class of additive, specifically polyprotein stabilizer X, over 2 decades ago. My research then unequivocally demonstrated its toxic effects and the dangers of its misuse. His voice, though still calm, was now tinged with a deep personal sorrow, a raw wound unmasked. But when I attempted to publish my findings, to warn the public, I was silenced. My reputation was systematically destroyed, my research funding was abruptly cut, and my career was violently stripped from me. I was forced to resign from my tenured position at Columbia University. I was blacklisted from every reputable scientific institution. I lost everything: my academic standing, my professional identity. Even my family was shattered by the immense pressure and the vicious smear campaign waged against me. I became homeless, officer, because I dared to challenge powerful corporations who prioritized profit over public health, corporations who benefited from concealing the truth about these very additives. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from the raw agony of decades of suppressed injustice finally being given voice. They buried the truth, and they buried me with it. Officer Miller, a seasoned veteran who had seen his share of street theatrics and elaborate cons, felt a prickle of unease. This was different. The sheer depth of knowledge emanating from Eli, the precise scientific terminology, the methodical presentation of his aged yet clearly legitimate-looking documents defied the typical profile of a street grifter. He glanced at Sterling, who was now visibly pale, a thin sheen of sweat breaking out on his forehead. Sterling avoided eye contact, his bluster completely deflated. The billionaire, usually so composed, now looked profoundly disturbed, even terrified. Officer Miller sensed that Eli's story, as incredible as it sounded, held a terrifying ring of truth, especially in the way it seemed to directly implicate Sterling himself. Sterling's unnatural silence was more damning than any confession. Officer Miller had a gut feeling, a well-honed instinct for when something truly significant was unfolding beyond a petty dispute. "Officer," Eli continued, his voice gaining power, resonating with conviction, "I have provided you with sufficient visual evidence and scientific foundation. I request that you immediately seal the daily grind, collect samples of their food and beverage products, and send them for independent analysis at a certified toxicology lab. Specifically, test for the presence and concentration of polyprotein stabilizer X and the polymer fibers. I also urge you to review my historical academic records at Columbia University. You will find my name and the details of my research, though you may also find evidence of a deliberate campaign to erase me. Furthermore, I ask that you investigate the circumstances surrounding my forced resignation 2 decades ago and the broader corporate connections that sought to silence my work. The truth, officer, is far larger than this single smoothie. It will be undeniably exposed once you begin to dig." Officer Miller nodded slowly, his face now grim. He understood the gravity of the situation. This was no longer just a simple public disturbance. This was a serious accusation of widespread public health endangerment, delivered with astonishing precision and backed by seemingly legitimate, albeit aged evidence from a man who, despite his appearance, clearly possessed extraordinary intellect. He looked at Sterling, whose composure had completely shattered, his jaw slack, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and dawning comprehension of the catastrophe unfolding around him. Sterling was clearly terrified, rendered utterly speechless. The tables had turned with a breathtaking swiftness. Sterling, the hunter, had become the hunted, caught in a trap of his own making. And then a profound collective silence fell over the gathered onlookers, a breathless anticipation that hung heavy in the air. This was the precipice of a revelation, The few customers who had been brave enough to linger, along with the stunned baristas of the daily grind who had emerged from the shop, stood frozen, their eyes fixed on Eli. They had come for their morning coffee, and instead, they were witnessing a profound, public unmasking of power and corruption. The air crackled with the raw tension of the unknown, of a truth hovering on the brink of eruption. Eli stood tall, his gaze fixed on Officer Miller, his posture radiating a quiet, indomitable will. He had laid his cards on the table. The clock, ticking unseen on Sterling's forgotten phone, was no longer a symbol of his failure, but a silent testament to his defiant triumph. The world held its breath, waiting for the final verdict. The piercing wail of police sirens, which had moments ago sliced through the morning air, now faded into a low, throbbing hum as the patrol car settled into stillness. Two uniformed officers, their faces unreadable, emerged from the vehicle, their gaze sweeping over the tense tableau before them. Alistair Sterling, his earlier bluster having entirely evaporated, stood frozen, his face a ghastly shade of white. The glint of triumph in his eyes had been replaced by a raw, naked fear, betraying the powerful man beneath the meticulously tailored suit. He stared at Eli, then at the smoothie, then back at Eli, as if trying to reconcile the image of the homeless man with the terrifying words of the former professor. Officer Miller, the taller of the two officers, approached first. His partner, Officer Davies, took up a position slightly behind him, scanning the small, hushed crowd that had gathered. "All right, Mr. Sterling," Miller began, his voice firm, his gaze holding the billionaires. "You called us for an alleged extortion attempt. Can you explain what happened here?" Sterling, still visibly shaken, swallowed hard, struggling to find his voice. "Officer, this man," he stammered, gesturing weakly towards Eli. "He accosted me. He claimed my drink was poisoned. He said he was some kind of professor. It's all a lie. He's just trying to extort money, I tell you." He tried to regain his composure, to reassert his authority, but his words lacked conviction, his voice cracking with lingering terror. He gestured towards the discarded smoothie cup on the bench. He even pulled out a microscope. It's all part of his elaborate scam. Eli, however, remained a picture of quiet dignity. He stood tall, his shoulders back, his gaze steady and unwavering. Leo, sensing the shift in dynamics, tightened his small hand around Eli's sleeve, his wide eyes fixed on the unfolding drama, a silent testament to his unwavering belief in the old man. Eli knew this was the moment, the culmination of decades of silence, of injustice, of waiting for the truth to finally emerge. He was not merely defending himself, he was fighting for every voice that had been silenced, every truth that had been buried. "Officer Miller," Eli said, his voice cutting through Sterling's frantic accusations with remarkable clarity and calm. Each word was carefully chosen, delivered with the precision of a seasoned lecturer. "I am not attempting to extort Mr. Sterling. My name is Dr. Elijah Vance, formerly a professor of molecular biology at Columbia University, and I am attempting to warn Mr. Sterling, and indeed the public, about a grave public health hazard contained within that very smoothie." He gestured towards the abandoned cup. Sterling let out a high-pitched, incredulous laugh, a nervous, desperate sound. "Dr. Vance, don't be ridiculous, officer. He's a homeless man. Look at him. He's clearly delusional. How could he possibly be a professor?" He turned to the onlookers, appealing for their validation, but their faces were now a mosaic of dawning realization and rapt attention. They were no longer dismissive. They were captivated. Officer Miller's eyes narrowed slightly. He had seen enough on the streets to know that appearances could be deceiving. "Dr. Vance," he said, turning to Eli, his tone now less accusatory, more guarded curiosity. "You claim to be a professor. Can you substantiate that? And what exactly is this public health hazard you're referring to?" Eli did not hesitate. He had prepared for this moment for years, meticulously organizing every scrap of evidence, every piece of his shattered life. He reached into his worn supermarket trolley, his movements deliberate, and retrieved a well-preserved, almost pristine manila folder. From within it, he drew out several documents, carefully laminated to protect them from the elements. a faded but authentic Columbia University faculty ID card with his younger picture, a copy of his doctoral degree in molecular biology, and most strikingly, a certificate of a patent he held for a revolutionary DNA sequencing technique, dated 25 years prior. He presented them to Officer Miller with a steady hand. "These are my credentials, officer," Eli stated, his voice ringing with quiet authority. "And as for the hazard, it lies within that smoothie." He pointed to the cup. "As I explained to Mr. Sterling, this smoothie contains an unauthorized and dangerous concentration of a chemical additive, a protein denaturing agent, which I designated polyprotein stabilizer X in my research. This young man," he nodded towards Leo, "witnessed a cafe employee clandestinely adding it. My portable microscope confirmed its presence, showing distinct crystalline structures and synthetic polymer fibers that are not naturally occurring in organic produce." Sterling, seeing the official documents, visibly flinched. His eyes darted nervously between Eli's credentials and the increasingly skeptical faces of the officers. He fabricated those. It's an old ID. Anyone can make a fake," he sputtered. But his voice lacked conviction, tinged with desperation. "Fabricated, Mr. Sterling." Eli's voice was sharp, cutting through the billionaire's denials. "Perhaps you recall the highly publicized academic scandal at Columbia University approximately 20 years ago. The one involving a molecular biology professor whose research on harmful food additives was abruptly discredited and suppressed, leading to his forced resignation." Eli's voice was laced with bitter irony. "My research, officer, was directly suppressed by powerful corporate interests who stood to lose billions if the truth about such additives came to light. The scandal was a smear campaign designed to silence me. The Sterling Group, through its venture capital arms, was one of the primary investors in the very food processing companies that sought to utilize these cost-saving yet harmful additives. Mr. Sterling, you might recognize the name of AgriCorp Innovations, a company your group acquired 5 years ago. My suppressed research directly implicated their foundational product lines." Officer Miller's eyes widened. He had a vague recollection of a decades-old academic controversy, dismissed as a rogue scientist. But Eli's direct accusation, coupled with the mention of the Sterling Group's recent acquisitions, sent a chill down his spine. This was no longer just a simple street dispute. This was a potential corporate conspiracy of staggering proportions. He looked at Sterling, whose face was now a mask of pure terror, his composure utterly shattered. Sterling was literally trembling, his lips moving soundlessly as if trying to form words that wouldn't come. The bated breath moment. Alistair Sterling, consumed by panic, suddenly lunged forward. With a desperate, almost animalistic cry, he tried to snatch the vital documents from Officer Miller's hand, clearly intending to destroy them, to erase the damning evidence Eli had just presented. It was a rash, impulsive act, completely unbefitting a man of his standing, born of sheer, unadulterated fear. The small crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath. For a terrifying second, it seemed as though chaos would erupt, and Eli's carefully constructed case would be lost in the ensuing melee. Officer Miller, caught off guard by the billionaire's sudden, uncharacteristic aggression, nearly lost his grip on the documents. But Eli, with the lightning-fast reflexes honed by years of street survival and scientific precision, anticipated the move. Before Sterling's hand could make contact, Eli swiftly, almost imperceptibly, shifted his position, subtly blocking Sterling's path. He didn't use force. Instead, with a deft, practiced movement, he reached into his trolley once more and pulled out a small sealed plastic bag containing a set of sterile chemical test strips and a micropipette. He quickly, elegantly, and with absolute certainty extracted a tiny droplet from the suspect's smoothie that had spilled on the bench and applied it to one of the test strips. He then held the strip aloft, the reaction immediate and undeniable. The strip, designed to detect specific protein denaturing agents, turned a vivid, unmistakable dark purple. "This, officer," Eli declared, his voice resonating with triumphant clarity, "is an instant preliminary test. This color change is irrefutable proof of polyprotein stabilizer X in dangerous concentrations. This is not a trick, Mr. Sterling. This is basic analytical chemistry. Your smoothie is indeed contaminated, and my research, as well as my identity, is now beyond reproach." Witness reaction. The effect on the onlookers was immediate and profound. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by an electrifying silence. Then, a murmuring began, rapidly escalating into a crescendo of disbelief, then shock, and finally, a surge of genuine outrage. Faces that had been skeptical, indifferent, or merely curious now contorted into expressions of dawning horror and profound admiration. People began pointing, whispering furiously, not at Eli, but at Sterling, and then at the daily grind itself. A woman clutched her own half-eaten muffin, her eyes wide with terror. A man dropped his coffee, the ceramic cup shattering on the pavement, his attention entirely consumed by Eli's revelation. "My God, he's right," someone whispered from the back. "He really is a professor," another exclaimed, disbelief turning into awe. "And they tried to silence him? For this?" A collective wave of anger surged through the crowd, aimed squarely at Sterling and the implications of his wealth and power. Officer Miller, holding the documents and the now vividly purple test strip, looked at Eli with new eyes, eyes now filled with dawning respect and a touch of genuine alarm. He then turned to Sterling, whose face had crumpled into a pathetic mask of pure, unadulterated defeat. Sterling's desperate lunge had backfired spectacularly, confirming his guilt to everyone present. The billionaire was utterly speechless, his arrogant facade utterly demolished. His lips still moved, but no sound escaped, his mind reeling from the catastrophic public exposure. His initial accusation of extortion now sounded hollow, self-serving, and incredibly foolish. "Mr. Sterling," Officer Miller said, his voice now devoid of any neutrality, chillingly authoritative. "Based on the evidence presented and your attempted interference with official documents, I am placing you under arrest for obstruction of justice, and we will be launching a full investigation into these allegations of public endangerment and corporate malfeasance. Officer Davies, secure the premises of the Daily Grind. No one goes in or out, and no products are to be moved. We need to collect samples for official lab testing immediately." Sterling, trembling, tried to protest, but Officer Miller's hand was already on his arm, a firm, undeniable grip. The billionaire, utterly humiliated, was led away towards the patrol car, a shrunken, pathetic figure. His carefully constructed world of impunity had shattered in a single, devastating moment, brought down by an old man with a tattered notebook and an unwavering commitment to truth. The crowd, now a fervent mass, parted to let the officers pass, their collective gaze following Sterling, no longer with envy or admiration, but with undisguised contempt. The vindication was absolute, the catharsis profound. Eli, the homeless professor, had not just won. He had ignited a fire of justice that would burn brightly for all to see. The chaos of the morning slowly subsided, replaced by a surreal, almost tranquil quietude. The flashing lights of the patrol car still cast an intermittent, ghostly glow on the daily grind, but the immediate drama had dissipated. Alistair Sterling, his head bowed in a mixture of shame and disbelief, was being led away by Officer Miller. His once impeccable suit now seemed rumpled, his formidable presence utterly diminished. Officer Davies, meanwhile, was meticulously placing "Police Line Do Not Cross" tape around the perimeter of the coffee shop, a silent declaration of the investigation to come. The curious crowd, no longer captivated by the immediate spectacle, began to disperse, murmuring amongst themselves, their expressions a mixture of awe and simmering indignation. Eli stood for a moment, simply breathing, the sudden stillness almost disorienting after the adrenaline-fueled climax. Leo, still clutching his arm, looked up at him, his small face beaming with a mixture of relief and hero worship. "You did it, Eli," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You really did it." A new figure approached them, moving with a respectful hesitancy. It was Officer Miller, now unburdened by Sterling. He carried Eli's laminated documents and the test strip in his hand. His gaze, once skeptical, was now filled with a profound respect. "Dr. Vance," he said, his voice softer, almost deferential, I apologize for my initial skepticism. Your evidence is compelling. We've secured the premises, and the smoothie samples are already on their way to the state lab for official testing. Given Mr. Sterling's reaction and the preliminary results of your test strip, I'd say you've uncovered something monumental." Eli simply nodded, a weary but satisfied smile gracing his lips. "Thank you, officer. The truth, once revealed, has a way of standing on its own." Officer Miller cleared his throat, a slight awkwardness in his posture. "Dr. Vance, the chief will want to speak with you, immediately. And I imagine there will be a lot of people wanting to speak with you. Reporters, investigators. I think it's time you came down to the station, not as a suspect, but as a key witness, a hero even." He hesitated, then offered a small, sincere smile. "And we'll make sure you get a good hot meal, and perhaps some proper rest." Eli looked at Leo, then back at Officer Miller. The thought of a warm meal, a safe place to sleep, was tempting, a luxury he hadn't known in decades. But more importantly, it was the first step towards reclaiming his life, towards ensuring the truth he had guarded for so long would finally bring about change. The downfall of the antagonists, Type A and B. While Eli and Leo were being taken to the precinct, the ripples of Eli's revelation began to spread with alarming speed. Alistair Sterling's arrest was a bombshell that rocked the city's financial elite. The initial news reports, fueled by eyewitness accounts and Officer Miller's official statement about the highly suspicious substance found in Sterling's smoothie, went viral. Footage of Sterling being led away in handcuffs, his face contorted in humiliation, dominated news feeds. The Sterling Group's stock plummeted instantly. Within hours, an emergency board meeting was convened, not in the plush executive suites, but under the harsh glare of public and legal scrutiny. Initial investigations, propelled by Eli's precise scientific accusations, quickly honed in on Agricorp Innovations, the food processing company that Sterling Group had heavily invested in. It was revealed that Agricorp had indeed been experimenting with and secretly using a concentrated version of polyprotein stabilizer X to cut costs and extend the shelf life of their prepackaged fresh products, including the smoothie base supplied to the Daily Grind. Their greed had pushed them beyond ethical and legal boundaries. The CEO of Agricorp Innovations, Mr. Jonathan Thorne, antagonist Type A, the malicious schemer, initially denied everything. He dismissed Eli's claims as the ravings of a disgruntled former academic and branded the police investigation a corporate witch hunt. He had been the architect of the cost-cutting measures, directly authorizing the use of the dangerous additive to boost profits and secure Sterling Group's investment. Thorne was a man driven purely by avarice, willing to compromise public health for personal gain. However, the official lab results from the state toxicology lab came back within 24 hours, unequivocally confirming the presence of polyprotein stabilizer X in dangerously high concentrations, matching Eli's earlier findings precisely. Faced with irrefutable scientific proof and overwhelming public outcry, Thorne's elaborate web of lies began to unravel. Internal documents, secretly leaked by whistleblowers within Agricorp, whose courage was emboldened by Eli's public stand, revealed his direct complicity in the illegal use of the chemical. Thorne was arrested and charged with corporate fraud, criminal negligence, and endangering public health. His empire crumbled, his reputation irrevocably destroyed, and his future was set to be spent behind prison bars, a fitting end for a man who had sacrificed human well-being for profit. Alistair Sterling, antagonist Type B, the misguided, prejudiced, though initially driven by arrogance and prejudice, found himself in a precarious position. He had been a victim of Agricorp's deception, but his blind trust and willingness to dismiss Eli had nearly cost him his life. More importantly, his public image, meticulously cultivated over decades, was in tatters. The board of the Sterling Group, facing a PR nightmare and a potential class action lawsuit from consumers, swiftly distanced themselves from Thorne and initiated an internal audit of all their food-related investments. Sterling, still reeling from the near-death experience and the sudden, brutal exposure of his own vulnerability, began to experience a profound shift. The fear of death and the humiliation of being so utterly wrong chipped away at his ingrained arrogance. He saw for the first time the devastating consequences of unchecked corporate power and the profound dangers of dismissing those who appeared insignificant. His repentance was not born of pure altruism, but a desperate need for public redemption and to mitigate the damage to his empire. He released a public statement, acknowledging the severe lapse in judgment and expressing profound regret for his dismissive attitude towards Dr. Vance. In a press conference, looking visibly shaken, he formally apologized to Eli, praising his courage and scientific integrity. "I was arrogant," Sterling admitted, his voice surprisingly subdued. "I was blind. Dr. Vance saved my life, and he saved countless others from harm. My prejudice prevented me from seeing the truth, and for that I am truly sorry." This public apology, a carefully calculated move, nonetheless carried a raw sincerity that surprised many. The meaningful new opportunity. Eli, sitting in a small, sterile interview room at the police station, having just given a detailed hours-long testimony, was then approached by a new team. Not police, but representatives from Columbia University and the State Department of Health, accompanied by Sterling's lead attorney. The university, now facing public scrutiny for its past actions, offered Eli a full, unreserved public apology for his wrongful dismissal, along with full reinstatement of his tenured professorship and all lost benefits. They offered to establish an endowed chair in ethical food science and consumer safety, in his name, providing him with a state-of-the-art laboratory, full research funding, and complete academic freedom. Eli accepted, not for the personal accolades or the return to his former status, but for the platform it offered. "This isn't about me," he told the university dean, his eyes burning with renewed purpose. "It's about ensuring this never happens again. It's about protecting the public. And it's about giving future scientists the freedom to pursue truth, even when it's inconvenient for powerful interests." Sterling, through his attorney, offered Eli an unprecedented private grant, a multi-million-dollar endowment to establish an independent, non-profit, Vance Institute for Food Safety and Transparency, dedicated to cutting-edge research, public education, and advocacy for ethical food production. This was his desperate attempt to restore his company's image and perhaps find a sliver of personal atonement. Eli, after careful consideration and ensuring the institute would be truly independent of Sterling Group influence, agreed. He saw it not as a gift from his former antagonist, but as a resource wrestled from the very system that had tried to crush him, a tool to forge a better future, and for Leo. Sterling, genuinely moved by the boy's quick thinking and undeniable courage, established a full, lifelong scholarship fund in Leo's name, ensuring he would have access to the best education from elementary school all the way through university. Leo, overwhelmed, could barely speak, but his eyes, brimming with tears, conveyed a profound gratitude that transcended words. Eli smiled, placing a hand on Leo's shoulder. "You saw the truth, Leo," he said softly. "Never stop looking. Never stop questioning." The contemplative dialogue. Days later, after the initial whirlwind of interviews, legal proceedings, and medical checkups, which thankfully found Eli in relatively good health, albeit malnourished, Eli found himself in a modest but clean and warm, temporary apartment provided by the university. He sat across from Leo, who was quietly sketching in a new notebook, provided by the police department as a gesture of kindness. The city outside seemed less harsh, the air somehow cleaner, or perhaps it was just Eli's perception. "So, Professor," Leo said, looking up, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "You're going back to school?" Eli chuckled, a genuine hearty sound that felt foreign after years of silence. "Something like that, Leo. I'm going back to do what I was always meant to do. To teach, to research, to fight for what's right." He looked at the boy, his heart full. "But none of this would have happened without you, son. Your sharp eyes, your courage to speak up. You saw what everyone else, including a powerful billionaire, missed. You were the catalyst." Leo shrugged, a faint blush on his cheeks. "You taught me to watch, Eli, to look for the things that aren't right. You taught me about ingredients and about how some things can hurt you slowly." Eli nodded, his gaze distant, remembering the quiet lessons he had given Leo over discarded coffee cups and shared scraps of food. "Indeed. It was a long road, Leo. 20 years in the wilderness. Sometimes I thought the truth would never see the light of day. But you, my boy, you brought it out. You gave me a reason to fight again." Are you sad about what happened to Mr. Sterling?" Leo asked, his voice hesitant. Eli sighed, a long, drawn-out sound. "Sadness isn't the right word, Leo. Pity, perhaps. He was a man consumed by his own arrogance and the pursuit of wealth. He became a victim of the very system he helped perpetuate. His public humiliation, the downfall of his company, the legal battles he faces. It's a harsh lesson, but it's a necessary one. True justice isn't always about punishment, Leo. It's about consequences, and about change. He looked at his scarred hands, then at the bustling city outside the window. This is a chance, Leo. A chance to build something better. To ensure that knowledge is used for good, not for profit at any cost. Leo nodded, his eyes bright with understanding. He looked down at his new sketchbook, then back at Eli, a profound respect in his gaze. The quiet, gentle man who had shared his meager meals and his boundless knowledge was now a celebrated figure, a beacon of hope. And Leo, the unhoused boy, had played a pivotal role in this extraordinary transformation. The new calm was not just a cessation of hostilities, but a profound sense of purpose, a promise of a future built on truth and justice. 5 years later, the crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and fresh coffee, but this time the aroma was not from a bustling city street, but from the meticulously maintained grounds of the Vance Institute for Food Safety and Transparency. Sunlight streamed through the expansive glass walls of a state-of-the-art laboratory, illuminating a bustling scene of dedicated scientists in white coats, their movements precise and purposeful. At the heart of it all, a man whose presence filled the room with quiet authority and an infectious passion for discovery, was Dr. Elijah Vance. Gone were the faded, oversized clothes and the weary slump of his shoulders. Eli now wore a tailored lab coat, its crisp white fabric a stark contrast to his still-weathered but remarkably vibrant face. His white hair was neatly trimmed, and while the lines around his eyes remained, they now spoke of wisdom and contentment, rather than sorrow. He moved with an agile grace, his mind as sharp and incisive as ever, perhaps even more so now that it was unburdened by the crushing weight of homelessness and injustice. His office, a spacious room overlooking a serene botanical garden filled with plants he had once scavenged for remedies, was not opulent, but filled with books, scientific instruments, and a constant hum of intellectual activity. Eli was no longer just a celebrated figure. He was a global authority. The Vance Institute, established with Alistair Sterling's multi-million-dollar endowment and further bolstered by government grants and philanthropic contributions, had become a leading voice in ethical food production and consumer protection. Its research had exposed numerous other harmful additives, leading to widespread regulatory changes and a greater emphasis on transparency in the food industry worldwide. Eli, the once forgotten man, now advised governments, consulted for major food corporations undergoing ethical transformations, and captivated audiences at international scientific conferences. He gave lectures, his voice clear and resonant, about the dangers of unchecked corporate greed and the vital importance of scientific integrity. He was living a life of profound purpose, far exceeding the academic standing he had lost decades prior. His most fulfilling role, however, extended beyond the hallowed halls of academia and global policy. It lay in the blossoming potential of the young minds he now mentored. Leo, no longer the scrawny, unhoused boy, was now a brilliant and enthusiastic university student. Thanks to the scholarship established in his name, he was thriving, pursuing a dual degree in biochemistry and investigative journalism. His keen observational skills, honed on the streets and nurtured by Eli, had translated into an uncanny ability to spot discrepancies in data and unravel complex narratives. He was a frequent visitor to the Vance Institute, often seen shadowing Eli in the lab, asking insightful questions that sometimes even stumped his former mentor. He still carried a small, worn notebook, though now it was filled with meticulous lecture notes and ambitious research ideas rather than hurried sketches. Their bond, forged in adversity, had deepened into a profound, almost father-son relationship. One sunny afternoon, Eli and Leo were in the Institute's main laboratory, overseeing a team of young researchers analyzing a new synthetic flavor enhancer. Eli, leaning over a chromatograph, meticulously examining a graph, felt a familiar presence beside him. "Professor Vance," Leo said, his voice now deeper, more confident, yet still tinged with the familiar warmth. The preliminary results for the Sweet Bloom 7 additive are in. It's even worse than we suspected. The long-term neurological impact could be significant. Eli nodded, his brow furrowing slightly. Just as the preliminary models predicted, another one designed to trick the palate and undermine health for profit. The fight is far from over, Leo. But we have the tools now, and the voice. He looked at Leo, a spark of pride in his eyes. You have a remarkable talent for this, you know. Your intuition, coupled with your scientific rigor, it's a powerful combination. Leo smiled, a genuine, uninhibited grin. I learned from the best, Professor. You taught me to see beyond the surface, to question everything. He paused, then gestured around the bustling lab. It's incredible, isn't it? All of this. You built this from nothing. From that park bench. Eli's gaze softened, a distant memory flickering in his eyes. Not from nothing, Leo, he corrected gently. From the truth, and from the courage of a young boy who refused to be silent. Paying it forward. Eli's philosophy, forged in the crucible of his own suffering, permeated every aspect of the Vance Institute. Beyond its groundbreaking research, the Institute ran extensive public education programs, offering free seminars and online resources to empower consumers to make informed choices about their food. Eli personally oversaw a scholarship program for underprivileged youth interested in STEM fields, ensuring that talent was never again stifled by circumstance or prejudice. He remembered the cold nights, the hunger, the feeling of invisibility. He ensured that no promising young mind would ever face the same barriers he had. Former street youth, inspired by Leo's story and Eli's legacy, found a new path, their intelligence nurtured, their potential unleashed. He believed that the greatest revenge against injustice was to cultivate knowledge and empower the next generation. He was often seen walking through the Institute's common areas, stopping to chat with junior researchers, sharing anecdotes, offering guidance. He established a mentorship program where seasoned scientists were paired with promising students from diverse backgrounds, fostering an environment of inclusivity and intellectual curiosity. His personal story, once a source of shame and isolation, was now a powerful testament to resilience, a living example that brilliance could emerge from the most unexpected places. The final symbolic image. One late afternoon, as the setting sun cast long shadows across the Institute's manicured lawn, Eli stood in his office looking out at the city skyline. It was the same city that had once swallowed him whole, that had dismissed him. But now he stood as a guardian, a protector. On a polished pedestal in the corner of his elegant office, not hidden away, but proudly displayed, stood his old, battered supermarket trolley. It was cleaned, polished, and meticulously restored, its rusty frame now gleaming faintly in the afternoon light. It no longer carried stacks of old books or scraps of paper. Instead, resting on its frame, where his meager belongings once lay, was a brand-new cutting-edge electron microscope, its sleek silver body reflecting the light. Beside it, tucked carefully in a small glass display case, was his original worn leather-bound notebook, its pages now digitalized and accessible to the world. He reached out and gently touched the cold metal of the trolley's handle, a silent acknowledgement of the journey it had shared with him. It was a tangible reminder of where he had come from, a symbol of resilience, and a powerful testament to the fact that even from the depths of despair, truth and justice could triumph. The clatter of its rusty wheels, once a sound of hardship, now echoed with the quiet triumph of a second spring, a life reborn, dedicated to illuminating the unseen dangers and protecting the vulnerable. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.